Welcome back, everybody. So, the weather is finally starting to cool off some. I've been looking forward to this all year. That being said, it is time to move into the final phase of my garden. And this is probably a video that I've been needing to put out for some time, but a friend of mine who watches some of my videos told me that it would probably be a good idea for me to put out a video on how I preserve things for the next year. And by that I mean namely seeds, but I decided to throw in a little extra as well. So, as everyone knows, I have, well, not everyone, but anyone who knows me personally knows that I have a fascination with bright colors. I like things that are colorful and very vibrant. They make me happy. So, one of the ones that I grow every year is that Bolivian rainbow that I sampled at least 2 years ago. So I need to save the seeds from that every year. Plus, I like to share that one with friends and family if they want something that they can grow at home. That's a really good one to grow at home. Super easy, super productive, very good to look at. If you don't like to eat them, at the very least, you've got something decorative. So I save it every year, and I keep one isolated. I keep it about 100 feet away from the others, and it's separated by a house. So basically a bee has to hit the pollen from one plant, fly up and over the house into the other one before dropping that particular piece of pollen. And it's, for all intents and purposes, this is a perfectly isolated plant that I use. But what I do is I try to save one. Not just the seeds, but the plant itself. So we're going to go over how I do those. I've already separated the plant from the container. The video on that was done one-handed. I'll probably include it at the end here, at the end of this one, instead of just planting it in here. But it was kind of crappily done. There are much better videos out there on that. I just couldn't get my tripod set up in a way that would get it, because it's just not tall enough. I actually have it sitting on a table just to get to the height that it is now. It's a cheap one. So this is my Bolivian rainbow. It's way too big to keep inside like this, because all these leaves are going to want to fall off. And unless you want to clean up leaves all winter, there's no reason to keep that many on there. So what I've done is I've cut through, God knows, I've cut through the roots and left a root ball about 8-10 inches wide, and there's a healthy amount on there. So what I've got here is a small container that I'm going to be putting it in. I'll see if I can angle this down some. Right here. So I make room in the container and just plop the thing in here like so, cover it up in a way that it's not top heavy, and then boom. But the problem is, this is way too top heavy. Now, what I mentioned in the video that like I said, I'll tack it on at the end probably. What I mentioned in the video is I'm probably going to turn this one into a mini bonsai for the duration of the year. I don't know if I'll keep it as a bonsai or if I'll transplant it back next year and just let it get big again. I'll probably do that anyway and then cut it back down. But the bonsai, for those who don't know, is a miniature version of the full-size plant that basically looks like a small tree. It's obviously not going to be nearly the size of a tree, but we can have it mimic one to the best of our abilities. So what we need is these. This is a very unscientific process. This is very subjective how you want this done. Easiest way is just start on the outside and work your way in. Don't be nice about it. This is a mean process, I know. You're cutting down this beautiful plant down into just a shred of what it once was. But there's a reason we're doing that. Okay, so let me get down to the base and get all the little ones off. There's no reason for the ones near the base. They actually just get in the way. Pull that one off by hand. It's actually probably easier. There we go. Little tiny one there. Okay, so we can get that whole thing off right there. And you've been eaten. So now, what we have is a plant that's actually just a little bigger than the root ball itself. This is much more in line with how you what you'd want to keep over the winter. Get that tucked in there. It's got this big thick root on it. This isn't the taproot. The taproot actually got cut off down. Or no, actually this might be the taproot. It's pretty much the thickest one that's on there. I cleaned it up, so there's a little bit less than there was when I first cut it down. For the most part, I tried to keep as much intact as I could, because the more roots you have intact, the better it's going to grow. I know I'm sort of all over the place on this one. This was an unplanned video, so just tuck that in. Now, the next step that I'm not going to be putting on here is very simple. You get more dirt, you put it on top here, so all of these roots on the surface are completely covered. Now, when you're doing bonsai, it's all about aesthetics. So you can peel away some at the base. If you do like the way that taproot looks, you can leave that one actually exposed. But in this case, the trunk was going in this direction and the root itself was going off like this and sort of downward at an angle. It's going to be very difficult to get that on top of the surface to look like, you know how when a tree gets really big and the roots grow along the surface, that's kind of what some people would aim for. It's not ideal with this one because just of how the roots grew. However, it's hard to see on camera, but this part right down here is a nice thick part of the base that was actually underground or under the dirt, and I can get that cleaned up and exposed, tear off a few of these roots down here, and that'll just be an even longer version of the base itself. So that'll be aesthetically pleasing. Now see, I guess I might be able to keep some of this root on the surface now that I look at it. I'll just have to bend it down some like that. There we go. Keep that under there. Really clean it off some. This is something that I won't be able to do on camera because I'm going to do it at my sink, where I can just sprinkle a tiny bit of water there and get it cleared off. But for the most part, that's how you make a bonsai. Now, ideally, this thing has to do a lot of healing, so you might want to go ahead and pluck off all of these extra pods that are left on there, because they're just going to kind of get in your way. And if you see any buds forming, go ahead and pluck those off too. So we're going to be left with a small, fairly ugly plant for now. And again, like I said, no science to this. This is all just very rough chopping of what we're looking for. As it fills out, you'll need to prune it more. So okay, I think we've got it to about where it needs to be. Maybe get rid of some of these smaller branches here. All the stuff on the inside really promote growth up and around the top, so it's got a crown on it. And let it go from there. So this is how it's going to look as I keep it inside over the winter. I'm leaving leaves on because I want it to be able to capture sunlight while it's sitting in the kitchen. It's not going to get enough light to produce over the winter, most likely, because the way the sun comes up in the winter, it just doesn't put enough in that bay window for long enough to cause it to produce. But come next spring, I think we're going to be in business, and I'm going to trim that off. Actually, I'm going to do that right now. Probably clean this up a little bit. But yeah, so the next thing I want to talk about, I'm going to take you inside for. This is the one that was specifically requested. That is, how do I save seeds for the next year? So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on ways that you can do that, and the way that I've done it for years, how tried and true it is. And I'll see you in just a couple minutes. So it's been a while, but we're back inside. Um, we are going to look at saving seeds for the next season. This is a very important process to anyone who really likes having the same kind of plants over and over again, but don't have room like I do to overwinter certain things. Actually, I might not be overwintering much inside at all this year. I may put a heating pad outside and just bring in a couple of the ones that I want to keep over, just to make sure that the roots don't get frozen. The heating pad should keep the um, should keep the soil warm enough that it doesn't freeze, because our harsh winters here get down into the 30s almost now. You gotta watch out. No, it does freeze here sometimes. On a really cold winter, we get down into the teens and whatnot, and even in the garage, which is attached to a heated house and is semi-insulated out there, even out there, they can be frozen to the point where they will not grow anymore. It'll damage the cell walls too much, and they're done. So, for now, I think ideally what we want to do is save seeds. So, this is going to be my sort of step-by-step process and a little mini Q&A session. I'll be asking the questions and then answering the questions afterwards. So I'm going to get everything adjusted here so it's more visible, and we will start it up. Much to the delight of the onlookers, you won't be able to see my face during this part. However, you will be able to just quickly see the finished bonsai. I've got some Black River rocks in there to make it pretty. Beyond that, that's pretty much what it's going to look like until it starts to fill out over the winter and into next spring. But that's not what we're here for. We're here to isolate seeds. Which seeds do we want to isolate? Well, this plant has a bunch on them. And I picked this piece because it's got a lot of good examples. First example, these. This is a unique variety where the unripened ones are actually purple, not green. Though they're not green, they're still not ripe. Pardon me. It also has a few that are bad, rotten. Something possibly ate a hole in them and it rotted from the inside, or it just rotted from the inside because it got old and that's what they do. There's a couple of them like that. Another example, this right here. This little guy was eaten and there are some seeds left actually on the plant. Because these are like a dingy brown color, I probably would say they're not worth saving. What we're looking for are the ripe pods, right here. The red ones that have been on the plant for a long enough time that there's not a single, just not even a tinge of a color other than their fully ripe state. This one, in fact, is a little bit soft to the touch, which is ideal. That means they've been on there, they're potentially overripe. Now, I could pull off a whole bunch of these things and just rip the seeds out of all of them for you, but I don't have enough time, or I don't think I want to waste a whole lot of y'all's time with that, so I'm just going to show you what it looks like when you're doing it with exactly one, and we'll go from there. So, what do you need? A sharp knife. Sharpest knife you can get. This just happens to be way too big for the job, but that's okay. Sharpie. Why? Because if you're doing more than one type of seed, you want to label them. Do not mix them up. They need to be done one type at a time. Otherwise you have little piles, they can get mixed up, and then you go to grow one next year, you label it as one thing, it turns out to be another. It's a mess. Optional, tweezers, just to help isolate things a little bit. These are not good tweezers. These are, junky ones, but they're good enough to pick up seeds. That's all they're needed for. You will need something to store them in. I went to Walmart and picked up a huge thing of cellophane bags. They're the 2" by 3". You can get away with 2 by 2, 1 by 1, just as small as you can get them and still actually fully label them. That's all you need. And finally, paper towels. As many of these as you can get. You can go economy style on this and grab one paper towel and then split it down the middle. And by split it down the middle, I mean split it flat ways into the different sections of ply. But honestly, I don't think it's worth it, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do it on video because my hands aren't steady today. Maybe? Maybe I can. Anywho, this is, oh, there we go, finally. So yeah, you can actually do it like this, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to use a regular old everyday paper towel as is. Oop, got a little damp spot. So this is why you need more than one paper towel. So there's a wet spot here. You want no moisture in the area you're working. So go ahead and get that as dry as possible. Clean up all the junk that's there. These happen to be seeds from the plant that I was just showing you there. You can discard that towel because you want nothing but bone dry flat paper towel. Seed on towel, knife. I'm telling you, this is a delicate process. Here's what you do. You take the knife, cut it in half. See that? That was hard, wasn't it? So I didn't cut it all the way because I just like to splay it open like so. Once you've done this, you have two options. With pods like these, you'll notice I'm not wearing gloves. These are not hot. If these were super hots, I would by all means be wearing gloves because that oil gets under your fingernails and you'll scratch your face, you'll go to the bathroom later on. Yeah, we're not going to talk about how much fun that is. It's loads. But the two options that you have with this are you can leave them in the pod as they are in a dry place that gets a bit of sunlight and no moisture on it at all. They'll eventually dry while they are in the pot itself, like so. This is an ahi pineapple that I've been dehydrating for about a month. Why a month? Well, because I knew this video was coming up, so I just kept leaving it. I'll get a low power thing here. Anywho, so what I would end up doing is separating the seeds, just scraping them off onto a paper towel and then funneling them directly into a cellophane bag, labeling them and being done with it. But we're not doing it this way with these, we're doing it this way. So that's the process with these. You cut it open, you let it dry. I mean, any plant you want to, but that's this process. You cut it open, you let it dry. Once this whole thing is dry, then you scrape the seeds off, put them in a bag, and they're done. The easier way, arguably the faster way, because you don't have that, especially in a humid area, that might not be very successful for you, is to simply take the seeds out of the pepper itself while it's still fresh. Again, not a delicate process. You're not going to hurt them. Just pull them out. Don't have to get all of them if you don't want to, but hey, we're here to save seeds. Why don't we get all of them, right? There's one little one in there that doesn't want to come out. There we go. So now we've got the seeds out and they're sticking to it. That's fine, whatever. All right, so the seeds are out. We can discard this. We don't have any need for it anymore. So now, all we do is fold this paper towel over one way, two ways. Make sure it's really, really nice and flat. Now, if you're only doing one, this won't take long at all. I generally would fold it and make it nice and flat and then leave it like this overnight. I would suggest to put it in a room with an overhead fan or put a small fan on them so it's constantly blowing air across the top of this, because this towel is going to suck the moisture out and then the air is going to evaporate it off of the towel and you're done. Then once they are dry, now see, this is probably going to be dry enough as is. Yeah, see, I can move them around freely on this towel without them getting stuck. I probably will end up leaving a whole bunch more of these to dry longer, but for the purposes of this video, we are going to pretend that I just fast forwarded 24 hours. So 24 hours have passed. This is all completely bone dry. Now we need to figure out what seeds to save. I don't think the camera is going to get in there real close on this, but I'm going to give it a try. So this seed right here is one color all the way across. It's cream end to end. There's a little tinge of red right there. That's just a piece of the pepper still left on it. That's not going to hurt anything. That's what you want to see. That is a healthy seed. Flip it over. It's the same on both sides. This, and it looks like we've only got one example, so I'm glad we at least got one, is not a healthy seed. It's a little bit harder to see, I'm sure, but if you look in the middle there, there's that black spot. That black spot is nicht gut, not good. You do not save these because the odds of it germinating are pretty slim, if not zero. you can take this one and flick it across the room, or you can just put it in a pile over here with the other stuff that you're discarding and be done with it. So now you've gotten rid of all the crappy ones. Cellophane bag. Open it up. Slide them in like so. Voila. It's that simple. It really is. So now you get as much air out of there as you can, seal it up, and then you make sure to label it. As we already went over, Bolivian Rainbow. This is of the utmost importance because if you mislabel it or you mix them up, you're in a hurting next year, and you won't know it until it's too late. Now, if you're doing multiple types and you're leaving multiples out overnight, go ahead, label the paper towel while they're drying. So I would just put B Rain or Bolivian Rain or P Ghost or Peach Ghost or whatever you want to write on there, just as long as you know what this is tomorrow. So I'd have one over here, this is Ahi Pineapple or A Pineapple. B Rain, I'd have Peach Ghost Scorpion, I'd have Ghost, I'd have Sea Reaper for Carolina, you know, however you want to label it. But as long as they're labeled, I mean, the labels can even be covered up, because as long as you can see it when it's undone, then you'll know how to label it when it's in the bag. So that's pretty much my whole process. It hasn't failed me so far. Like I said, make sure you have gloves if you're working with the Super Hots. These are very mild. They're not going to hurt me. I can, you know, not going to do anything. Not actually, it was a little bit warm, but not too bad. So once they're done, where do you store them? In a cool, dry place. You can put them in the fridge. Just make sure they're not in the fridge in a place where they can get actually frozen. Don't put it up where the actual blowers are. Maybe put it in the vegetable tray. You can put them, seal them up in, where's my tin? Here we go. So I have them in a tin that was left here. It says Seeds 2020, although it's kind of hard to read. This will keep most of the moisture out. I mean, there's not a whole lot of moisture in the air anyway, but there you go. All of my different seeds for next year. And when I say all my different seeds, I mean I've got a bunch for next year. Keep them all in the same place. Seal it up pretty good. There we go. And then throw that bad boy in the bottom of the fridge and forget about it until next year. They don't need to be in the fridge. You don't want to keep them in a place where they get warm enough they could start to try and germinate. Basically, room temperature, they'll be fine. Cooler than room temperature, even better. Frozen, bad. So, that was that. There are some questions that a lot of folks ask, and I'm going to get to those right now. So now we've seen the process on how to get seeds from the plant to the bag. Well, unfortunately that doesn't really answer all the questions that I know folks ask about this. I've been doing this for a long time, and I researched many ways to do all the things that I do. I highly suggest you check other sources because I'm by far not the best, not even by a close margin. But I do have a little bit of knowledge, having been doing this for a few years now. So I sort of compiled a frequently asked questions list. It's not all the questions that you'll have. Any questions that you may have, feel free to ask either me directly or in comments. I do my best to check comments, but admittedly I'm not the best at it. Kind of have to turn the notifications off because they are a pain in the butt to get rid of. So let's just get right into the list then. They're not in any great order, so just bear with me. What plants should I save the seeds from versus the plants that I should overwinter? So this is a little bit of a weighted question. It's gonna depend on a couple of things. One, is it a specific phenotype that you've been looking for a long time and have had a hard time finding? If so, then you should, one, isolate seeds from it, and then two, overwinter it anyway. That way, in the event that the seeds that you grow aren't true to the type or hybridize themselves with something else and became a completely different variety that's not what you're after, you still have the original plant. You can try again next year. Other than that, it's really just up to you. Save seeds from everything that you can. There's no reason not to. It takes up very little space. All of mine right in here, this is more varieties than I'll probably grow next year, and I've got a few more in another container too that I'm going to end up putting in here eventually. So really, save seeds from all of them, overwinter whichever ones you feel necessary. Keep in mind that overwintering, they will get started faster in the spring. As soon as that last frost is gone and it starts to heat up and you start to see the lows in the nights hit the 40s and the 50s and whatnot, you'll want to be out, you'll want to have the plants outside getting full sun from then on. How soon can I start saving seeds? As soon as you have ripe pods. That's it. So you can start saving seeds from an overwintered plant sometimes as early as April or into the first parts of May. For the rest of them, as long as it takes them to mature, June, July, sometimes August for the super hots. But as soon as you see them fully ripe, you can start saving seeds. Can seeds be saved from commercially purchased peppers? Yes and no. No from things like red pepper flakes, the commercially bought ones in the shakers. From what I was told, those are irradiated to prevent anything from growing in there, because if a little bit of moisture got in there, it'd probably be ruined anyway, but at least it wouldn't grow and expand and possibly, cause it to break out of the container. It would just be bad and it wouldn't be as big a mess. But from commercially purchased ripe peppers, yes. Green bell peppers are not ripe, period. Don't take the seeds from those. It's pointless. Red, yellow, orange, you can find white ones, you can find brown ones rarely. I don't know if the purple ones are the ripened ones or if they're the ones that hybridize with the with that purple that replaces the green step. Like this is an unripe pepper. It's not, these ripen the red that you see. So unripe, ripe. I don't know if the purple bells are the ripe variety. I'm going to guess they probably aren't. But for the most part, all the others are. White, orange, red, yellow, brown. That's most of them. Another good thing about saving commercial seeds is they're grown in a huge field. Most of the time, they're grown in a huge field of all the same kind of plant. So bells specifically, it doesn't matter what color they are unless you want a specific color for whatever reason. If they mix, you're going to get an orange bell or a red or a yellow or something in between them. Doesn't matter. It's still going to be a bell. It's still going to be a sweet. The only time it matters is when they're the super hots or something that's even in the middle that you don't want to have crossed with something else. But when they're grown in a field of just the same kind, the odds of cross-pollination with a different species are practically zero. So definitely good to go. I've done it before. One other thing to keep in mind is some of those, I want to say, could be a specifically developed hybrid that produces more. The reason this matters is because hybrids don't always grow true. I grew an orange bell one year that didn't put out a single pod, not one, and it was in prime location. Got great sun all day. I kept it watered throughout the year. It never struggled or anything. It could have just been a bad seed that turned into a plant that didn't do anything, or it could have been one of those hybrids that when you save the seeds from it, you're not going to get a true form plant. For the most part, they're going to grow just fine though. How many seeds should I save? As many as you want to. As many as you can, really. Reason being, you never know when your plants are going to fail. The story, the way I always tell it is if I plant 3 seeds, or if I try to germinate 3 seeds, not one of them is going to germinate. But if I lay out 30 seeds, all of them are going to germinate. So the more you have, the more opportunities you're going to have next year to get a full-grown plant. So as many as you can. Like I said, this has more than I'm going to grow next year. And it's got probably 75 to 80 seeds of most of those varieties, if not more. So there's no reason not to save them. They take up very little room. Can seeds from unripened pods germinate? Yes, rarely. What I think generally happens in that case is you may have caught a pod that was very close to being ripe. It was just about to start, and you may have gotten one of the seeds that was fully ready. But for the most part, saving seeds from unripe pods is a total waste of time. Don't bother. So don't save seeds from green bell peppers. How do I isolate seeds to make sure they grow pure? See, that is a question for the masses. There are many ways to do it. The easiest way, if you grow in planters, is to just take one and move it away from the others. You'll want to have as much distance as you can put between the two, and if there's an obstacle between them, it's even better. So like if I grow on one side of the house, or I grow in the backyard, if I want to truly isolate one, I'll put it in the front yard. The Bolivian rainbow here, as you may have seen, all my plants are in the back, but this one is up front. It's the only one that's up front. The odds of that having been cross-pollinated are, again, basically zero. That's one way. The other way is to isolate flowers on the plant itself. Now, there are a few ways to do this. One, you can put the paint bags. They're large mesh bags. You can put it over an entire branch of the plant and cinch it down pretty tight around one of the well-established stems that you've got. And as the plant grows in the bag, it will begin to put out flowers. The flowers will self-pollinate because you don't need bees to pollinate these. You can just shake them a little bit, and the pollen inside will get onto the parts of the flower that cause it to germinate. Anywho, they self-pollinate. That's what you need to know. So you can either do a whole stem with a larger mesh bag, or you can get the much smaller mesh bags. These are sold on Amazon. They're fairly cheap. They're wedding gift bags, and as you see, mesh, so you can see right through them. Whoop, whoop. And what you would do then, let's say this this one here, we'll pull this off. We're going to say that, ooh, even better. There we go, perfect. So we're going to say that this right here, which you can barely see, is a bud that has not opened. This actually is forming into a pepper itself already, so it's a little bit past that. For all purposes, we're going to pretend this is a bud. So what you do is you just wrap this over and around, not around just the bud itself. You want to get more than that. So you want to get, because it won't support the weight. If a good wind picks up, it'll just rip the thing off. So you get it around that entire end of the plant there, cinch it tight, and make sure it's got room to breathe. And there you go. Now that bud is in there, safe from any kind of bugs that are potentially going to cross-pollinate. And once it flowers up, you'll want to come by and shake it a few times, or if it's in a windy area, the wind will take care of it for you. Once you see a pepper forming, you can go ahead and take this off. Now, you're going to want to label this. There are a couple of ways of labeling it. One way is to cut a little piece of straw, like a drinking straw. Just snip it and then cut it long ways and slide a piece of the straw around the isolated flower. That way, when you're looking at it, you got this like bright white or bright yellow or bright orange tube on the ones that you've isolated. Or it's a little riskier, because I think that tape has some, it binds too strongly to it and can sometimes damage the plant itself if you don't do it right. But you could just wrap tape around it and label it that it's isolated. I prefer the straw method. So once those are isolated, once the pepper starts growing, as soon as it ripens, you've got 100% isolated seeds every time. So that's my preferred method. Isolating the plant is the most guaranteed to produce results. This one, you'll have a lot of dropped buds. It happens. It happens all the time. And you don't realize how many buds drop off a plant until you start trying to isolate them, and you see 6 or 7 in the bottom of your bag, and you're just like, well, crap, what do I do now? So those are my methods of isolation. What happens if you don't use isolated seeds? Well, you have that potential to get a hybrid. You could have one that instead of ripening red, it ripens orange or yellow. This may be something you're after. However, it may not. You may want a specific color. Like if I want regular orange habaneros, I know that they're not quite as hot as the red ones, so I like them in that range. If I let them mix with something else, they could change colors to something else. They could mix with a different species altogether and become way, way, way hotter. They could mix with something else and become super duper mild and boring. So you sort of take a risk. Now, to mitigate some of that risk, if this were a full plant, like let's just say that this is a big 3 foot tall and 2 foot wide plant, you go down into the inside. If you find a ripe pepper down here in the middle, something like that, where there's a whole bunch more on the outside, not isolate, but grab the ones from the middle. If it's not an isolated plant, if you haven't done anything to specifically make sure that any particular branch of this plant has been isolated, the ones in the middle are most likely to grow true next year because they're the least likely for an insect to go from another plant, skip all this other stuff, and work its way down in the middle and hit that one. It's more than likely going to go here, 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 and then eventually get to the middle, or just have the wind do it because, like I said, they do self-pollinate. So, what's the deal with growing hybrids? Now, this is not a question that I'm fully equipped to answer. I am not a geneticist, but what I will say is they can be interesting. You can get new phenotypes with the same basic flavor. Part of the thing that you see when I'm doing reviews on this channel is I will compare many different varieties to ones that are more well known. So I'll say something tastes like a ghost. Well, a ghost has been around for a long time. It's been hybridized a lot more recently, but it's still going to keep that flavor. The Trinidad Moruga Scorpion, that's another one. That's a very well-known variety. A lot of them are going to get compared to that because that specific flavor, it's kind of like, so like the Carolina Reaper, I would say is a hybrid. I mean, obviously it's a hybrid, but it's been stabilized. After you do it for a certain number of generations, you get a stable variety, and then you can start to expect the same outcome each year, or with each subsequent season. So I know that didn't answer a lot of it. I would suggest you do research on another page where someone is better equipped to answer that question than myself. How long should I dry seeds? There's no real rule on this one. It really, again, it depends on the process. If you're stringing them up like they do in Mexico. Jeez, I can't think. They have peppers strung up and they just sort of leave them out to dry. They can do that there. We can't do that here in the southeast US because it's way too humid. That's a good way to get just a whole bunch of rotten peppers, and it's gross. The length of time is as long as it takes to dry them. Now, you probably don't want to use a humidifier, a dehydrator, because sometimes they can get too hot, but as long as you keep it on a cooler setting, it could work. Let's see, the one that I have over here, the lower setting is 95, 105, 135. Yeah, I can go all the way up to like 160. So at like 160, I probably wouldn't, I think that would be a little bit too warm, but on the lower settings, they should be fine. But yeah, until they're bone dry. That's the short answer for that. How do you identify bad seeds? Well, as seen in the previous video, dingy colors, or not previous video, but previous section, dingy colors, not cream colors, black spots, or already visibly growing mold. If it's got mold on it, even if you dehydrate it, when you rehydrate it next year, that mold can continue growing. I've had it happen a couple of times where I've used the paper towel method. I get them wet, and then I come back the next day, and there's just black all over them. And you immediately have to get them away from the rest because you don't want that mold to spread to the others and damage those. How do you isolate plants to prevent hybridization? Sort of already touched on this one. You can either move a plant by itself or dig one up like I did earlier. I think I actually wrote that one twice, so skipping ahead. What methods of overwintering do I prefer? If I had a sunroom, it would be very simple. Bring the full container with the full grown plant in and plop it down in the sunroom. I've done it a few winters now where I'll drag a few into the into the living room here and put them up against the sliding glass door where they get 5 or 6 hours of light and they never freeze. Then I just pull them outside next spring. It works, but it's a pain. Nikolai likes to dig in the dirt. They drop pods all over the place that can get down in the carpet. They drop leaves all over the place that die and crumble into the carpet. They're dirty. They usually bring aphids inside, which means if you have indoor plants, they're going to get infested with aphids too. If you start your plants indoors, they can then get infested with aphids. It's a nightmare. Sunrooms are the best, but if you want to, you can just drag the whole thing in. The other method, you can cut them way down to where they're basically just a big thick stem and maybe a few leaves on it if you want to, kind of like what I did with the bonsai here. You can wow, this one's got a lot of water in the base, so I kind of don't want to move it too much, but just cut it down to its bare minimum and go with that. Now the one thing oh yeah, I did spill some water there. Woo, right on my pants. One thing you have to realize is there are bugs that are going to live in this soil. Aphids have seeds down there. Could be white flies, fungus gnats, that sort of thing. So you really have to be careful with what you're bringing in. This is fresh soil that I got from my composting. Pretty certain there's nothing that's growing in there because there's no reason for aphids to be in there. It's been way too dry for the last little bit for there to be any fungus gnats. So I'm pretty sure this is going to be fine. If I start to see anything coming out of it though, I'm going to take it outside and I'm going to hit it with neem oil and be done with it. So you can either move the whole plant, you can chop it down like so, or are there really any other? Well, there's a greenhouse, a heated greenhouse. That's essentially the same as a sunroom, but it works year round and you can probably produce year round with one of those. The last question that I have on here, when should I start my seeds for the next spring? This is based entirely on your weather. Your plants will die if they freeze, period. I take it back. Your plants will die if the roots freeze. The plant itself may be damaged, so like this branch right here, anything that's attached to this branch may die. But if the roots are fine, it can continue growing elsewhere. My Reaper out there, one part of it got severely damaged earlier this year by the movers, and that part's gone, but the rest of it was still growing. So as soon as the freeze is gone, your last freeze is done, you're not going to have any more cold weather until next winter, that's when you can bring stuff outside. When can you start your seeds though? Before that. I generally in North Carolina start mine February 1st. You can start them as early as January 1st if you want to. You'll have an even bigger head start, but if you grow a lot of varieties, you're going to have a really crowded grow space. I use a grow tent. It's not 100% necessary. It does make things a lot easier, but it doesn't need to be done that way. You can just have a tray that sits in a warm window with a lot of sunlight and be fine. The light source is the biggest limitation that most folks have, because a regular window doesn't generally get enough light to prevent them from getting real long and stringy and leggy. So anyway, there are many other videos out there that explain that a whole lot better than I do, but when is based on your freeze cycle. So I think that covers just about everything that I wanted to cover with this. Like I said, if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer as many as I can. Otherwise, Google is your friend. That's where I found most of my answers myself. I hope you enjoyed, and without any further ado, I'm going to cut to the one-handed digging job that I did on this plant here. I haven't actually watched it to see how good it turned out, so it could be terrible. Just enjoy that if you'd like. Otherwise, I think I have one more video I might do this year. It's a real crap season I've already been over why. But next year is going to be good. I have a lot to go with next year. So, enjoy this part coming up if you want. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video, whenever that may be. Thank you. As a second part of this tutorial, I'm going to show how I transplant for overwintering purposes, or for the purpose of making a bonsai chili. What you need is a fully grown plant, one that has, let me get this in there. What you need is a fully grown plant, one that has been out for the whole season and has a nice thick base. This is a smaller variety, so the trunk is not going to be super thick. It's only 1 year old. Not even 1 year, so it's 1 season old. Let me clear some of this chaff out here. And as far as this plant goes, this right here is as firm and solid as it's going to get. So what you need to do, it's a pretty simple process. Just take any old trowel that you've got lying around, and you just dig straight down. You're going to be cutting roots. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be pretty. See right there, that's a thick root. Go all the way around to the other side. It's a little bit awkward. Get that out of the way. It's a little bit awkward to do this while holding the camera, but I'm doing what I can here. Just know approximately the size of the pot you're going to be moving the plant to, and just accordingly. Yeah, I'm going to have to break a few, but that's okay. I think there's a rock over there. That's what that scrape was. Continue around until we hit that rock again on the other side. I'm hoping I'm getting most of this on the camera. I'm sorry. I'm not very good at this sort of thing. Just bear with me. So, now that we've done that, we then dig down and lift as a whole. Oh, wow. This old trowel is a bending here. It's a little bit weak at that spot there. See if I can bend it back a little bit. Maybe it'll work again. Again, this is a much better job done with 2 hands, or more if you've got help. Alright. So with that, we can feel sort of where there is at least one big root on this side that I need to get taken care of. And that's it right there. Come on. Break, you piece of crap. There we go. I think that'll do it. Yeah, there we go. So you see we've got a big old root ball. It's got some leaves stuck in there that never quite decomposed. I'm probably going to clean this out a bit and then put fresh dirt down. But that's that. So I'm actually going to bring this in for the second part of the video. Ooh, look at there, got a nice big thick root. I hate to break that one, but that one's going to be just fine, because we're going to keep that. I think we're going to keep it right about there, like on the surface, and put a little bit underneath for looks. But yeah, that's the first part of the process. Then you just move it over to your container.